Urban legends have a strange way of creeping into our minds. Some are outright absurd, while others feel eerily possible, lingering in our thoughts for days. Today, I'm sharing a tale that shook me to the core. It's called The Licked Hand, and by the time I'm done, you'll understand why it's one of the most chilling legends I've ever come across. Let's step into the shoes of a young girl, Anna. Anna was an only child, living in a sprawling house with her parents. This wasn't just any house. It was an architectural masterpiece with tall windows that flooded the rooms with light during the day, but turned into unsettling black mirrors at night. Long hallways stretched endlessly, and the vast rooms seemed to hold their own secrets, whispering faintly when the wind picked up. Her family was well off, so they had the luxury of living in such a house. But with luxury came loneliness. Anna's parents were always busy. Board meetings, gala dinners, and business trips filled their schedules. Most of the time, Anna was left alone, her only companion being her golden retriever, Max. Max was more than just a pet to her, he was her best friend. He followed her everywhere, from her morning walks in the sunlit garden to evenings sprawled together on the couch. His wagging tail and soulful eyes made Anna feel less alone in the echoing vastness of her home. One evening, as her parents prepared for yet another overnight trip, Anna felt a knot of unease tighten in her chest. "You'll be fine, sweetheart," her mom said, smoothing Anna's hair. "You're old enough to stay by yourself now, and Max will be here to keep you company." Her dad chimed in. "We've triple-checked the locks. Just keep the house secure, and don't forget to leave the lights on." Anna nodded hesitantly. Max's comforting presence was enough to make her agree. She hugged her parents goodbye, watching as their car disappeared down the long driveway. The setting sun bathed the house in a warm orange glow, but as night fell, the shadows seemed to stretch and grow, filling the house with a heavy silence. To distract herself, Anna dove into her usual routine. She finished her homework at the kitchen table, played fetch with Max in the yard, and later curled up on the couch with a blanket to watch TV. Max lay sprawled on the rug, his eyes following her every move. Flipping through channels, Anna stumbled upon a breaking news report. Her heart skipped a beat as the anchor's serious tone filled the room. "Authorities have issued a warning tonight after a dangerous criminal escaped from a nearby prison. Residents are advised to lock their doors and windows and remain vigilant. The fugitive is considered armed and dangerous." Anna froze, her grip on the remote tightening. She glanced at Max, who tilted his head, sensing her unease. "It's okay, Max," she murmured, trying to calm herself. "It's just a precaution. They always overreact on the news." Still, the thought of being alone in such a massive house with an escaped criminal on the loose sent a shiver down her spine. Determined to feel safe, Anna decided to double-check every lock. She moved from room to room, testing each window latch and door handle. The process was tedious. The house had 3 floors, and each hallway seemed longer than she remembered. "Better safe than sorry," she whispered to herself, her voice sounding small in the quiet house. She reached the last room on the main floor, checked its window, and let out a sigh of relief. Everything was secure, or so she thought. In her hurry, Anna had overlooked one crucial detail: the basement door. By the time she returned to the living room, the tension in her chest had eased. Max greeted her with a wagging tail, and she gave him a reassuring pat. "See, nothing to worry about," she said aloud, more for herself than him. She heated up some leftover pasta for dinner, sharing scraps with Max under the table. His gentle nudges against her leg made her smile. Later, Anna went upstairs to get ready for bed. The bathroom mirror reflected her nervous expression as she brushed her teeth. "Just one night," she muttered. "I can do this." Crawling into bed, she felt the familiar weight of Max jumping up beside her. His warm, furry body pressed against her legs, grounding her. She reached down, and he licked her hand, a simple gesture that always comforted her. "Good boy, Max," she whispered, her eyes growing heavy. Before long, she drifted into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, Anna woke with a start. The house was deathly quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. She wasn't sure what had woken her, a dream, perhaps. Max was still lying beside her, his rhythmic breathing reassuring. She reached down, and once again, he licked her hand. Feeling slightly comforted, she closed her eyes. But just as she was about to drift off, a faint sound reached her ears, a soft, repetitive drip. Drip, drip, drip. Anna frowned. Was it the bathroom faucet? She had turned it off before bed, hadn't she? Groaning, she slid out of bed, careful not to disturb Max, and padded toward the bathroom. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and she reached for the light switch. The faucet wasn't dripping. It was tightly shut. Anna's heart began to race. She stood there for a moment, listening. The dripping sound continued, but it wasn't coming from the bathroom. It was coming from downstairs. "Just a leaky pipe," she muttered, trying to convince herself. But the unease gnawing at her stomach wouldn't go away. She tiptoed back to her bed and reached for Max. He licked her hand again, his warm tongue reassuring. The dripping noise seemed louder now. Anna grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. She hesitated at the top of the staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. The beam of light illuminated the dark hallway below, casting eerie shadows. Step by step, she descended, the wooden stairs creaking beneath her weight. The sound grew clearer as she approached the kitchen. Drip, drip, drip. It was coming from the sink. She let out a shaky breath. "Just a faucet," she whispered, trying to steady her nerves. But as she entered the kitchen, her flashlight caught something that made her blood run cold. The dripping wasn't coming from the faucet. It was coming from a dark, sticky puddle forming beneath the table. Her breath hitched as she followed the trail upward. Dangling from the ceiling was Max. His lifeless body swayed gently, blood dripping from his throat. A scream caught in Anna's throat as she stumbled backward. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And then she heard it, a low, raspy whisper. "Humans can lick too." The next morning, Anna's parents returned home to find her curled in a corner, shaking and muttering incoherently. The police were called, and a search of the house revealed muddy footprints leading from the unlocked basement door to Anna's room. To this day, Anna refuses to speak of what happened that night. But one thing is certain: the legend of the licked hand isn't just a story, it's a warning. So tonight, as you lock your doors and windows, take a moment to double check. Because sometimes, the scariest things aren't what we imagine, they're what we overlook. It was a cold, moonless night, and the world outside Anna's bedroom window was shrouded in darkness. The winds howled faintly, rustling the branches of the old oak tree outside her house. Inside, the clock ticked steadily, a comforting rhythm that filled the silence. Anna had always been a light sleeper, easily stirred by the slightest sound. Around 1 a.m., her eyes snapped open. At first, she wasn't sure what had woken her. Then she heard it, a faint noise, distant yet distinct. It sounded like something falling, or perhaps a door creaking. She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. The shadows in the room seemed to shift and stretch as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. For a long moment, she strained her ears, waiting for the sound to repeat itself. Silence. Anna let out a shaky breath, brushing her dark hair out of her face. Probably just the wind. she muttered to herself, trying to push away the unease curling in her stomach. She lay back down, pulling the covers up to her chin, but her body remained tense, her ears attuned to every creak of the house. Then she heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. It was soft but persistent, the sound of water hitting porcelain. It was coming from the bathroom down the hall. Anna froze. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to stay put, to pull the covers over her head and pretend nothing was wrong. The idea of getting out of bed and venturing into the dark hallway filled her with dread. She glanced at Max, her faithful golden retriever, who was lying beside her. His warm presence was a constant source of comfort. "It's just the faucet," she whispered, reaching down to pet him. Max licked her hand, a familiar gesture that never failed to calm her. "Good boy," she murmured, her anxiety easing slightly. Max's licks felt like a silent promise. "I'm here. You're safe." She decided to ignore the dripping sound. It could wait until morning. With Max by her side, she convinced herself there was nothing to fear. Slowly, her eyes grew heavy, and she drifted back to sleep. When the first rays of sunlight seeped through the curtains, Anna woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed. The fears of the previous night seemed distant, almost silly in the light of day. She stretched, yawning, and glanced around the room. But something was wrong. Max wasn't on the bed. "Max?" she called out, her voice breaking the morning stillness. There was no response, no familiar thud of his paws against the floor. Assuming he'd gone downstairs, she got out of bed and padded toward the bathroom to freshen up. Her feet felt cold against the hardwood floor, and a faint chill ran down her spine. As she reached for the bathroom door, a strange feeling washed over her, an inexplicable sense of dread. The door creaked open, and her breath caught in her throat. Max was there, hanging from the ceiling. His lifeless body swung gently, his golden fur matted with blood. The sight was grotesque, almost unreal, as if she had stumbled into a nightmare. Blood dripped steadily from his mutilated form, pooling on the tiled floor in a dark, sticky mess. Anna staggered backward, her knees buckling. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, no, no." Her eyes darted around the room, desperate for an explanation. And then she saw it. On the bathroom wall, scrawled in blood, were the chilling words. Anna's stomach lurched, and she doubled over, retching. The comforting licks she'd felt during the night they hadn't been from Max. Her legs felt like jelly as she stumbled out of the bathroom, tears streaming down her face. She gripped the banister as she descended the stairs, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. In the living room, she grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights casting eerie patterns across the walls of Anna's house. Officers swarmed the property, searching for any signs of an intruder. They found evidence of forced entry through the basement door. A set of muddy footprints led up the stairs to Anna's bedroom, stopping at the side of her bed. The officers' grim expressions told Anna everything she needed to know. The intruder had been in her room, just inches away from her, as she slept. Anna recounted the events of the night in a shaky voice, her words tumbling out in a jumbled mess. The officers listened intently, their faces pale with horror as she described the comforting licks she'd felt. "You're lucky to be alive," one of them said quietly. "If you'd reacted, he might have attacked." The words sent a fresh wave of nausea through Anna. Her ignorance had saved her life. In the days that followed, Anna struggled to move past the trauma. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't step into the bathroom without breaking down. The image of Max's lifeless body, and the blood-scrawled message haunted her every waking moment. Anna's life changed forever on that cold winter night. The air was crisp, her breath visible as she hurried home from an evening with friends. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she approached the old, two-story house she had inherited from her grandmother. It wasn't just a house, it was her sanctuary, a place filled with childhood memories of holidays, laughter, and safety. But that night, something changed. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, she felt an odd chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The house was silent, unnaturally so. The grandfather clock in the living room ticked steadily, but it felt like the sound was swallowed by the stillness. Anna dismissed it, blaming her unease on fatigue. She locked the door, checked the windows, and made her way upstairs to her bedroom, her faithful golden retriever, Max, padding along behind her. Max had been her loyal companion for years, and she trusted his instincts more than her own. He had a calming presence, always alert to any danger. That night, he seemed normal, his tail wagging lazily, his eyes half-lidded with sleep as Anna got ready for bed. The routine was the same as always. She brushed her teeth, pulled on her favorite oversized sweater, and crawled under the heavy quilt her grandmother had made. Max settled on the floor beside her, and his rhythmic breathing soon filled the room. But sleep didn't come easily. Anna tossed and turned, her mind plagued by a strange feeling she couldn't shake. It wasn't just the silence, it was something deeper, a sense of being watched. She told herself she was being silly. This was her home, and she was safe. Hours passed before she finally drifted into a restless sleep. Anna woke with a start in the middle of the night, her heart pounding for no apparent reason. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside her window. She reached down to the floor, her hand brushing against Max's warm fur. He licked her hand reassuringly, and she smiled. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She closed her eyes again, comforted by his presence. But just as she was about to drift back to sleep, a faint sound reached her ears, a soft creak, like a floorboard bending under weight. Her eyes snapped open. The sound had come from downstairs. Anna froze, her breath caught in her throat. She told herself it was nothing, perhaps the house settling or a gust of wind rattling a loose window. But deep down, she knew better. Max hadn't reacted, so she tried to brush it off. Minutes stretched into an eternity as she lay there, straining to hear anything else. When no further sounds came, she let out a shaky breath and tried to relax. The next morning, the unease lingered, but nothing seemed out of place. She went about her day, pushing the strange incident to the back of her mind. But that night, the feeling returned stronger this time. Once again, Anna found herself waking in the dead of night. The room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into her bones and made her shiver beneath the quilt. She reached down to touch Max, and he licked her hand as usual. But the sound came again, a soft creak, this time followed by what sounded like a faint rustling. Anna sat up in bed, her heart racing. "Max," she whispered. The dog didn't respond, but his steady breathing reassured her. Summoning her courage, she decided to investigate. She grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the darkened hallway. With Max trailing behind her, she crept down the stairs, every step making her heart pound harder. The house was still, too still. She checked the living room, the kitchen, and the dining room. Everything was exactly as it should be. The doors were locked, the windows secure. Finally, she returned to her room, feeling foolish for letting her imagination run wild. Days turned into weeks, and Anna's unease grew. She started noticing small, inexplicable things. A chair slightly out of place, A picture frame tilted. Items in the kitchen moved just enough to catch her attention. She tried to rationalize it, blaming her forgetfulness or perhaps Max's curiosity. But then came the night she couldn't ignore. Anna woke to the sound of breathing. It wasn't Max's soft, rhythmic breaths. It was heavier, slower, and coming from somewhere in the room. Her blood turned to ice. She didn't dare move, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as she strained to listen. The breathing stopped, replaced by the creak of a floorboard. Panic surged through her. She reached down to touch Max, and once again, he licked her hand. The familiar gesture brought her a shred of comfort, enough to calm her racing thoughts. But something wasn't right. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. She had locked Max in the living room before going to bed that night. Her hand trembled as she slowly turned on her phone's flashlight, pointing it toward the foot of her bed. What she saw made her scream. A man was crouched there, his gaunt face twisted into a sick grin. He was holding Max's collar in one hand, the other extended toward her like a predator closing in on its prey. Anna's scream startled the man, giving her just enough time to grab her phone and run. She bolted out of the house, barefoot and terrified, not stopping until she reached her neighbor's porch. She banged on the door until they answered, their faces pale with shock at her disheveled appearance. The police arrived minutes later, storming the house with their weapons drawn. But the intruder was gone, leaving behind only muddy footprints and Max's collar. The aftermath was a blur. Friends and family rallied around Anna, offering comfort and support. But no matter how many kind words they spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She moved out of the house soon after, unable to bear the memories it held. Her story spread like wildfire, becoming an urban legend known as the Licked Hand. Some dismissed it as a hoax, a twisted fabrication meant to scare people into locking their doors. Others swore it was true, pointing to police reports and news articles as evidence. For Anna, it didn't matter whether people believed her. The scars were real, both physical and emotional. She often wondered what might have happened if she'd discovered the intruder earlier. Would she have survived? Or would her scream have been the last sound she ever made? Years passed, but the memory of that night clung to her like a shadow. She avoided mirrors, closets, and dark corners, as if the darkness itself might hide something or someone waiting to strike. Therapy helped to some extent, but the fear never truly left her. It lingered in the background, a constant reminder of how fragile life could be. She eventually adopted another dog, hoping to find the same sense of security she once had with Max. But even her new companion couldn't erase the terror that lurked in her mind. Now, I have a question for you. If Anna had discovered the intruder that night, do you think she could have survived? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Personally, I believe her ignorance saved her. By remaining unaware of the danger, she avoided provoking the killer. Sometimes, the greatest weapon is not knowing what's hiding in the dark. As the last whispers of the night fade into silence, we are left to wonder what is truly lurking in the shadows. Was it just a nightmare? Or did something sinister follow us home? Remember, the darkness is never as far away as we think. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and keep your lights on. Who knows what might be waiting just beyond the door? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with those who dare to listen. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay tuned and keep the darkness close.